meeting for, that's past 5:30. So for April 10th, 2023 to order, roll call, please.
Chris Zellner,
Here.
Gary Hersberg,
Here.
Jill Ditzelberger, Brian Malish, Chris Thomas,
Here.
Brian Wallace,
Here.
Kevin Phelps.
Here. Okay, first thing we have is minutes. Anybody need anything changed or I'd look for a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion's been made
Second.
and seconded. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. And I should remind, we need to make sure that we have our microphones on green when we do all of our stuff. So that way it can be recorded as well. All right, next we have public comment. Are there any public comments for this evening for items on or off the agenda?
I've received several public comments for public hearing items. I do have one that is not for a public hearing item, Linda Ashmore. If you'd like to go up to the podium.
My comment is on the general development plan and site SIP for Kilkenny Farms West. There's a few things on there that don't match up with our comprehensive plan. And one of them is that it's taking an area that's supposed to be commercial and making it single family. From what I'm seeing, it's all single family. And I thought we were kind of trying to do more mixed development. The other part of it is the setbacks that I'm seeing are looking like 3 feet and 5 feet, which seems really short. And I'm not familiar enough to know if that's been something that you've granted with other PUDs, but it just seems like it's really close for each other, you know, people's houses to have that kind of a setback. And the other thing is one of the others, and I'm not sure, I haven't looked at this closely enough, but the last Kilkenny one, when you have outdoor patios, it's been by right. Where the other parts of town, if you have an outdoor patio, it's been by a conditional use permit, and that allows for a little bit more oversight if you have issues with noise or whatever. And so I'd like to see that put in. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others, Tracy? Public comment wise.
No registrations.
Okay, then we'll move on. Under first business item, public hearing and discussion action on a conditional use permit, Grace Coffee, 100 Baker Street to allow outdoor seating and service. This is an item that's for final action by Plan Commission. Tim?
Thanks, Chair Zellner. The materials for this item can be found on pages 8 through 18 of the packet. The applicant is requesting approval of a conditional use permit at 100 Baker Street to allow outdoor seating. This is the site of the boutique hotel and Grace Coffee. Okay, this isn't working. There we go. Might be a delay. There. An image of the outdoor seating area is shown on the screen right now. It includes a pergola along with a patio on the north side of the outdoor seating area that would include a fire pit. The area of the outdoor seating area is approximately 600 square feet. It would be immediately adjacent to the building and accessed through overhead doors and a man door adjacent to the building, which would also allow for ADA accessibility. One of the primary issues associated with this, so this is just an overview incorporating the aerial. The applicant is proposing additional parking stalls in the area along the north property line or northeast property line. Upon review of this, staff feels, as well as the code provision in our zoning code regarding drive aisle widths, that these parking stalls does not allow for enough free flow traffic through this area. So staff is recommending that those parking stalls actually be pushed to the north side of the site to allow for proper circulation through the site. Other than that, staff is recommending approval of the attached site plan and CUP document that's presented in the packet.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So then I'm going to open up our public hearing. Tracy?
I have one public hearing comment. It's undecided. They chose to provide written comments. I'll read them. There is a senior community located directly
Tracy?
behind.
Can we say who the person
Oh, I'm
is?
sorry. Carl Marks, 16 Village Homes Drive. Carol Marks, sorry. This is for the outdoor seating. There's a senior community located directly behind the Mill House backyard. These are the questions I have. Where will the outdoor seating and service be located? How high will the lights be located? What will the cafe hours be? Number 4, how far back to the fence is the property line? Number 5, who are all the businesses in the building? Question mark, available parking, question mark. And number 6, will there be outside music? And that's it.
Okay, any other comments from anyone? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing. Brian, do you want to address any of the questions that were asked? If you have, or
Do you want
Tim?
the applicant to try to? Where will the outdoor seating and service be located? I think that's shown on the site plan, but Tim's gonna.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's shown, it's on the north side of the building. Right here, kind of in purple, light purple, and then this sort of orange tan area, that's the patio area immediately adjacent. So the outdoor seating area is right in this area adjacent to the building.
I'll just, where and how high will the lights be located?
The lights, I don't know if there may be, the applicant I know it's here, maybe addressed that. I don't know if there are going to be accent lights to light the facility, but I don't know if
Yeah.
is Brett or.
They'll likely just be.
Well, you kinda go.
Just the height of the first.
Go to the podium. Everything in the site plan is the key.
Yeah, we do plan to light the sorry, I'll speak into this. We do plan to light the pergola with string lights, how you'd see on a pergola at somebody's house. So that's only going to be as high as the first floor, not even as high as the building.
Is that in your site plan?
No, that's not. The string lights are not. That's just like an AC 120 volt set of string lights. So that was not something that we had in there.
Okay. What will the cafe cafe hours be?
Weekdays, they open at 7 a.m. And close at 4 p.m. Weekends, they open at 8 a.m. and close at 4 p.m.
And just so that you all are aware, because there's been a request for the outdoor patio with potentially alcohol consumption, assuming an alcohol license is granted. We have within the conditional use permit and on page 10 of your packet, which is 2 of the CUP, kind of the standard hours language that we allow people to utilize the outdoor areas. How far back to the fence is the property line?
That yellow line that can be seen in that top left corner kind of shows where the end of the property line there is. And the fence that they're speaking of is kind of out of sight right now, but that's not where any of the seating will be. So not sure if that was the specific question as to how close the seating was to it. But that will, like Tim had mentioned, that will potentially be the parking stalls that we don't want on the side there. We're going to move to the back corner with a turnaround spot back there.
Who are all the businesses in the building? Question mark, and then a question regarding available parking.
The Mill Hotel is the second floor tenant. And then Opros is in the basement, which is a fly fishing company that does pack and ship products out of the basement. And then Grace Coffee will be the first floor tenant.
Do you want to take the parking?
Yeah, and as far as parking is concerned, they will meet the parking requirements. They've asked for a variation from strict adherence, but we generally don't require the parking stalls for a seasonal facility like this. And if it is determined that more parking is needed, there is sufficient area on the north side of the site to add more parking. But since this is only seasonal, I don't anticipate any parking issues with this.
And to that end, there is language that is standard in our CUPs that said, this is again on page 10 of your packet, page 2 of the CUP. If parking becomes an issue, the Plan Commission has a right to reevaluate the conditional use permit. The last question is, will there be outside music? Again, this gets at our standard language that we have in these outdoor patio CUPs. Limitation of outdoor service and amplified music to 9 p.m. Sunday through Thursday and 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday. And then it goes on with some other language, but that's the language we've utilized for other outdoor patios.
Okay, I don't know if Carol's in the room, but there you are. Okay, I just want to make sure from the lights perspective, did you think there was going to be some higher lights like for parking and just that were going to be
Well, they'll be in my bedroom.
the ones that are taller you're talking
Well,
about?
The fence, on the other side of the fence is my bedroom and living room, so I have a lot of concerns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't.
No, I don't think anyone considered the senior community behind that fence.
When we were designing the project, you mean, or when?
All together, from the start of the sale, everything.
Oh, what's that? Yeah, if you want to talk, Carlos, you can talk to it.
Hello. So,
If you can
the-
state your name too, please.
yeah, my name is Carlos Falcon and I'm with Grace Coffee Company. So we are not going to put like any kind of like extremely bright light. Like what we put for the pergola space is just accent lighting that honestly, like our hours, the kind of business that we run, it's not, we're not a bar, we're not a restaurant, most of our locations, they close at 4:30. And the ones that they have liquor, we close at 6, 7 o'clock. We have never had in the 3-4 years that we've been in business, a single issue with the police or anything that happened, so we are the first ones in saying, that if there is an issue with the music, loud music, lighting, we're here for corrected, we can work any of that stuff out. But for previous stores that we have, I'm talking 10, we have never run into any issue with that. And we always work for the community and with the community with everything what we do.
Go ahead, Brian.
So I would just point out that so one of the conditions of approval within the document is the site plan must be consistent with the development agreements that the village executed with the applicants regarding the Mill House Quilt Hotel. I will acknowledge, it would say that within that development agreement, when the TIF agreement was approved, it was anticipated that there would be an outdoor patio for this property, which is one of the reasons why we built that into the development agreement to make sure that the board's concerns would be addressed. And the other thing that I would say is another condition of the CUP is it says prior to issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall file a final site plan with the community development director addressing all conditions of approval. I mean, to the extent that you are okay with the lighting in the way that it has been described at the meeting, I can't remember exactly how it was characterized, but we could build that specifically into the document. It sounded to me like that lighting is going to be more consistent with maybe you might see at a residence as opposed to a business, at least the way it was described.
Okay, commissioners, questions? Gary?
They mentioned a fire pit. Is that going to be a gas fire pit or wood?
Fire. No, sorry, like gas.
Gas. Okay. I just want to make sure wood fire wouldn't get out of control a little bit.
Brian?
One thing on the park, there's no parking lot lighting there right now, is that correct?
In the rear, on the north area,
Yeah, well, just in the lot as a whole.
I think there is some on the south area.
Would you anticipate that we need to do that further on if they're gonna have parking in the back just from? And how is that going to affect some of the concerns that were brought up? That's one question. Should I just list them all right away?
Yeah.
The other thing is, they talked about a fence. Is there a fence there now? That goes around the backside of that property?
Yeah, there is currently not our fence. I believe it's adjacent properties fences. It's a 6-foot high privacy fence surrounding this whole back corner here. to your question of the lights, we do have lights on pillars that are no higher than this high for our parking lot lights, but if we have to add parking, we'll obviously have to abide by the code and the lighting codes and handle foot or all the specifications there.
Okay. And if we eliminate the parking for access for emergency services, the number of stalls that are potentially available still meets our requirements.
Yeah,
I think you kind of mentioned it did.
I'm sorry, they'll still have to add nine more stalls, but they'll
In the
just have to be
back.
shifted.
They'll have to add 9 in the back.
Yeah,
And that's where, so we have some questions too on looking for some, I don't know, what would the word be on something outside of the code, just given the nature of our business and the hours, proximity with foot traffic. And then also my business, the fishing business in the basement is not open to the public. So currently by code, it says we need 8 spaces per 200 square feet of retail space used by or servicing customers. So do we need those 8 spaces? We have 3 employees and it's not open to the public. And that kind of eats into adding these spaces,
Sure,
right? So you gotta figure out kind of what we need for total spaces, and then we obviously have the space to put it. We actually talked to Chief Brian Adler today. He also was not a huge fan of the angled spaces over here. He really wants those removed, and for obvious reasons, so he can get a truck to the back if need be. But now that comes into play too on the number of spaces needed. And does that mean we need to move those spaces, or does that mean we don't need?
Yeah, I would
those
question the other
spaces?
4 or 5 spaces that are there as well. It still seems a little tight even with those there, but I'll defer to Tim on that. The only other question I would have is on the hours. If they are committed to certain hours of business, why would we put in here 9 or 10 o'clock? Could we change those hours?
You can, I would say that we'd want to work with the applicant on that in light of the fact that we also want to treat people fairly and
Sure.
essentially give these same
But if
hours.
they're committed to, 4 or 7 o'clock,
If they're willing to modify the hours to be more consistent with their business operations, we would certainly be open to that.
Kevin?
No, I'm good with everything. I like the hours. I mean, it sounds like my neighbors when it comes to lighting and music. It's no different than what I see in my neighborhood, so I don't have any problems.
Chris?
my questions are already addressed.
Okay. You said the fence is not your fence, it's somebody else's fence. It's on different property?
I believe it's part of that development behind us. Yeah,
So the condo association, it's the condo association's fence. Okay.
sure.
And then Brian, to their question about the parking, that they don't know if they need it. Can you address that?
Well, I would say this. I mean, when you look at your packet on page 12, the fire department has some comments on parking. And then on pages 13 and 14, Strand did their analysis of the site plan and have comments on parking and circulation. So those are built in to the condition, those comments are built into the conditional use permit. Now, we do have, I've already commented on this language. This is not necessarily standard language that we've had in a CUP where it says prior to issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall file a final site plan with the community development director addressing all conditions of approval. I think because of some of the issues that we have to work through with parking, in particular with the fire department, that may be that's the primary reason for that language. Now, to me, it's I think the planning commission really has two options. One, you could say we're comfortable with that. We're comfortable with the comments made by the fire department and by Strand. And so staff will simply implement those and we'll move forward and the site plan will be updated accordingly. Or you could say, you know what, we'd like to see those issues resolved before we act on this. And so you direct staff to work with the applicant over the next month before the May plan commission meeting and bring it back. That seems to be that, and the hours of operation seem to be the two, and the lighting are the three things that I've heard you all comment on.
So as the applicants, does that time frame work for you guys?
Well,
It's
as
basically a
far
month delay.
as, I mean,
We're trying to open for business in the next month, like, so like we can get advantage of the summer. Kind of thing, like winning like the community and all the stuff that we are able to do in the summer, you know, like we're all investing a lot of money in this particular building, you know, like there's gonna be a lot of changes. And at the same time, a lot of good things for the community, you know, like bringing stuff that Waunakee doesn't have. And yeah, like the hours at the most, like we just don't see ourselves being open later than 8 p.m. because we're just not that kind of business. And for the liquor consumption, like what we sell, we don't sell shots. We don't sell like, you know, like those kind of drinks. We sell like mimosas, Bloody Marys, like the stuff that people come in and pair with breakfast. You know, like we're not per se like the kind of place that you come in and you get drunk, you know, and I have like enough like data from all the businesses that we own to prove that.
Can I ask you, what were the hours that you said you would be open?
Probably at the latest like 8 p.m. It's still need to be like, we
The-
still,
The thing that comes into play on the various is if we have small events and they want to use that space, which is again, based on other locations is a tiny percentile, but if the village is saying that other places use it until 9 or 10, then
yeah.
we would just like to be in line with everything else in the village and have that option, right? But business closes at 4 p.m.
Exactly. And you know, like just to remind him, like we are not that kind of place that even if we have an event, like we said, you know, like okay, this is the max amount of volume that you can have. Like you can keep it inside, cool. If not, like the outside, we're gonna put a restriction until what time they can use it. Like again, like we're not that kind of business that we're trying to make like the community against us. We keep growing and like in the best of like all of our intentions, they just be friends with everybody. You know, if there is an issue, just fix it and move on.
Both.
So with that comment, I agree with you that you should be good neighbors. And I think the people that you need to be good neighbors with are here tonight. And it would probably behoove both sides to have a good conversation about what is acceptable. NIMBYism is always going to be wherever people go with a business. It's just going to happen. There's people that are going to be opposed. There's going to be people that are for. And those who are against, it's important to address their needs if at all possible. So I would suggest that you guys make sure that you connect to make sure with that lighting or whatever it may be, that it's going to be acceptable on both sides.
Yep.
So that's important.
Happy
So
to the question though on the timeline, I mean, I would prefer if we could work with staff and just abide by the codes, right? And make sure everything is accordingly. We got a guy coming out tomorrow to start giving us quotes on asphalt and whatever we're gonna need back there, lighting and things like that. That way we can start to move along, and as long as it's kosher with the business or with the village.
perfect.
I had one other question. Is there a ramp or does there have to be a ramp?
So you mean ADA accessibility? That'll come from the inside. There's actually is a ramp along the front of the building. So people would enter that way and then come through. There's like a garage door entrance out to that seating area.
Brian, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I can get behind approval tonight. Sounds like the hours maybe is less of an issue. I would say that if they can work with staff on creating a better flow for the parking. And as long as staff is good with the lighting concept, I think I can get behind it.
Is that a motion?
Well, I can make a motion, sure.
Well, that
Is
sounded like
it as-
that sounded like a motion. Brian, was there something in there that was missed?
I would prefer to use the recommended motion I did,
I would have thought so.
because it talks about the site plan too.
Okay, go ahead.
Motion to approve the site, motion to approve the site plan and conditional use permit to construct an outdoor seating and service area at 100 Baker Street as recommended by staff, and to the how do I want to say, the working with staff to alleviate the parking issues and lighting issues that may come up.
Yeah, and just so you're comfortable, that is a component of the draft CUP that you'd be
Yep,
approving.
yep.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have public hearing and discussion action on a conditional use permit. GSS on behalf of US Cellular 6308 Woodland Drive, construction of a new mobile cell tower. This is also an item for final action by the Plan Commission. Tim,
Thanks, Chair Zellner. Yep, the applicant is seeking approval of a CUP to construct a 125-foot monopole cell tower and associated ground equipment at 6308 Woodland Drive. The facilities would be sited within a 50-foot by 50-foot easement area as shown on the map on the screen. And included on that is the enclosure of the facilities themselves would be by a 40 by 40-foot wide, 7-foot tall chain link fence. Facilities would be accessed via a new 10-foot wide gravel driveway. Tighter shot here. There we go. On the north side of the road, which is approximately 75 feet west of the existing residence. The Waunakee Westport Joint Plan Commission recommended approval or conditional approval rather at its 3/14/23 meeting. These materials are found on pages 19 through 28 of the packet, including the draft CUP.
Okay, thank you. So I'd open the public hearing for this one as well. Is there any comments?
I have two comments. And if there's anybody attending on Zoom who wishes to speak, they should raise their hand and I will call on them in a moment. First comment, Norma and Troy Culture, 6360 Woodland Drive. When will the cell tower be energized? And does this comply with the IEEE 519 ? This is an international standard. The state of Wisconsin adopted this rule. If no, they need to find out before any permits are issued. If yes, then it should be confirmed by an independent contractor. 18 microamperes of contact current causes cancer. Please see page 547 highlighted paragraph. We are told that our property, home and farm will be a hotspot for contact current due to the urine and manure. They need to comply with IEE 519. And then there is attachment with highlighted paragraph that says, in addition to these relative aspects of dose, the absolute as well as modest level of contact current modeled 18 UA produces average electric fields in tissue among its path that exceed 1 MVM at and above this level. The NIEHS Working Group 1998 accepts that biological effects relevant to cancer have been reported in numerous well-programmed studies. The effects of the working group sites are increased cell proliferation, disruption of signal transduction pathways, and inhibition of differentiation. The NIEHS endorses this conclusion in its final EMF Rapid Report 1999. And that's it for that one. And then I have Mary Heimbecker, 306 West 3rd Street, undecided, wishes to speak.
Hi, my name is Mary Heimbecker. As an individual with a degree in technology management, I certainly understand the need to upgrade towers. As a homeowner, I understand not wanting an ugly cell phone tower in my neighborhood. If it were going up in mine, I would suggest having a tower built that would go with the area this is going in. For example, this is a farm with silos in the vicinity. Put the tower inside a newly built silo. I know Colorado does this already for their towers. It's required. I know this simply because my brother has built several out there for them. I don't know if that would help with any of the concerns that the Halshire farm has, but it might help with some of those also. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is no one on the Zoom meeting that has their hand raised at this time.
Anyone else here that would like to address?
I'm Norma Culture.
If you-
And so am I gonna get some answers at like when When is that cell tower gonna be energized?
You can ask them. Is the applicant here? Man. Wait,
Hold on one second.
do you want to close the public hearing first? Usually we have comments.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, before that. So just hold on one sec. Thank you. Was that,
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I get the answer rightly.
thank you. Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing. And it sounds like we have somebody here that can answer some of those questions.
Good evening. Well, I'll do my best.
And if you can say your name and
My name is Mike Heisinger. I work for GSS. US Cellular is one of our clients, and I'm here tonight representing their interests. In terms of, I'll do my best. I've scribbled down as many of these items as I could, and I'll do my best to address them. In terms of when the tower is going to be actually built and energized, that is yet to be determined. We have yet to make it through zoning, obviously. Our next step, assuming that we are approved in zoning, would be to apply for a building permit, hire general contractors, and then coordinate with them on the construction of the site. So in terms of when the tower is going to be energized or on air, that's yet to be determined. There were some codes that I haven't heard of before, but that's not to say that those codes are not something that we already comply with. The work that we do is in compliance with all federal and state codes as well as local ordinances. In terms of the health and safety concerns that have this is something that we hear quite often. And first and foremost, let me just say that I am not a radio frequency engineer. I'm not a scientist. I'm a site acquisition agent for GSS, and we work for primarily for US Cellular. A site acquisition agent works with willing property owners to find somebody who would entertain the notion of having one of these projects put on their property. And when we have a fully executed lease agreement or something very near that, we kind of begin the deep dive into the zoning ordinance language to see what is it that we need to be aware of in order to be successful in this endeavor. And even before we start knocking on doors, sending out letters, shooting emails, things of that nature, we're trained to look for specific types of property that would be a good fit for these types of projects. And typically those properties are zoned agricultural, commercial, and industrial. And so long before I dropped off my business card for the property owner that we're currently working with, we identified this property as agricultural. There was some back and forth to determine, because this technically lies within the town of Westport, there was some back and forth to determine whose ordinance language we would in fact be using in order to develop our project proposal. Sure enough, we found that this property is zoned for these types of projects. So we haven't asked for a variance in order to for our proposal. In terms of the issues with cancer, again, this is something that continues to be brought up. So I'm not a radio frequency engineer. I'm not an engineer of any type. I'm not familiar with the particular study that was brought up, but I do know that there have been several independent studies that have been overseen by World Health Organization, the American Cancer Society. Everything that we do, once again, it complies with both FCC regulations, so and state code. I'm more than happy to. I may have passed this out at another meeting. I do have a very brief summary report from some of these organizations that have overseen studies. If the board would like to hear this, or the plan commission would like to hear this, it's only a couple pages long, but this goes over very briefly. Kind of a snapshot of how the use of these types of technologies has skyrocketed, and they've been in use now for over 50 years. answers that people tend to want to link to the use of these technologies have not increased. So this particular summary comes from the Cellular Telecommunications Industry Association, which may come off as a little bit biased, but all they are doing is grabbing several different independent studies that have been done by World Health Organization, National Institutes of Health, and the American Cancer Society. So we always do our best when working with property owners or neighbors or people who have these types of concerns. We respect people's opinions and right to voice their concerns. We hear them. We just respectfully don't think there's a legitimate cause for concern per all the studies that have been done. 5G technology is not a new technology. It's marketed, unfortunately, for people like me, it's marketed as a new technology, but it's in the same ballpark of frequencies as 4G, 3G, and 2G. And those technologies have been in use globally for decades and decades, and they've been tested and tested and tested again. So the concern for health risk, I was going to say I think is minimal, but that doesn't really matter what I think. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a site acquisition agent. But I assume because the federal government, the state government, and all these independent studies have been done as kind of guided Wisconsin state statute. And in the very first, in its limitations section of the mobile tower siting section of Wisconsin state statute, I'll just read it for you. It's section 4 of 66.0404. It says limitations with regard to the siting and construction of a new mobile service support structure and facilities. A political subdivision may not do any of the following. And the very first thing it says there is impose environmental testing, sampling, or monitoring requirements or other compliance measures for radio frequency emissions on mobile service facilities or mobile radio service providers. The federal government in the 1996 Telecommunications Act has also preempted, I guess you would say, jurisdictions from saying, we don't think that RF is safe. The studies have been done again and again and again over the course of decades. So from health and safety standpoint, we don't think certainly don't believe it's a valid basis for denial. In terms of the other concern about what was brought up about making it look like a silo, we operate once again within the village's code of ordinances. If that were a requirement, that would have been something that we would have visited several months ago. Because it is not, revisiting it at this point would mean that there would be a great cost for us to go back and do something that essentially is not a requirement of the village.
Okay, thank you. Brian.
So let me also try to address some of the questions. First, on that last issue, we wouldn't be able to have a code provision that would say we want this to look like a silo or something else. One of the additional prohibitions on what we can do as a municipality is we don't get to make decisions on these cell towers based on aesthetic concerns. I do the language of the statute that the individual read is correct. We are limited on the different testing that we can do. Now, I will say, however, that the conditional use permit that is in your packet on page 21, page 2 of the CUP, we do have language in there that says the applicant shall comply with all federal, state, and local laws, ordinances, rules, and regulations in connection with the operation, maintenance, construction, and installation of the mobile service support structure and mobile service facilities. So to the extent that something related to the impact on humans or animals or other impacts is actually a law or a regulation, they would have to abide by that. This particular report, I'm not sure if it rises to the level. It may not. If it does, then they'll have to comply with it. If it doesn't rise to the level of a federal or state law or regulation, they would not have to. The other issue I would say with respect to timing, and this applies to this CUP and every CUP that we issue, essentially someone who's granted a CUP needs to start construction within 12 months, or they can kind of come in at the 11th hour and get a building permit. And then as long as they act on that building permit within 6 months. So really you have kind of a 12 to 18-month window that you have to start. If you don't, then the CUP becomes invalid. So there is always pressure on all parties that receive CUPs at the village to move forward with their project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, Gary, any questions?
No questions, but I do have concerns. The Kelchers have, you know, I think I'm not sure if they're valid, but we don't have answers for them to specific questions. So I'd feel more comfortable if they felt more comfortable.
Chris?
What's the current makeup of the US Cellular towers in Waunakee right now? Do we have any like in our water towers? Are there other US Cellular towers already out there? And what purpose would this one serve?
Provide more coverage to the village of Waunakee, the town of Westport, and the town of Springfield. So in terms of whether or not they have any antennas on the water tower, or I can't speak to that. I know that I oversaw the site acquisition work on a project that's in the construction phase at 1100 Frank H Street. So that's in the works right now, and that will have US Cellular on it.
So this one would expand coverage or allow coverage in an area that doesn't already have it?
With the newer technology, yes to both. So with the newer technology, 5G, what 5G does is it allows you to send larger data files, but just doesn't travel as far as 4G. So filling in the gaps in the coverage and providing new coverage is high on their list of priorities.
Okay.
Brian?
I would just concur with Gary. The only other question I have on here is just raises the flag a little bit, is the $20,000 surety bond. Don't know that I've seen that before in any of these CUPs or.
Oh, yeah, it's on every cell tower that we have, we require
On the
that.
cell tower, okay, all right. Otherwise, I concur with Gary. As long as the Kelchers are satisfied, I'd be satisfied.
Kevin?
And I'm in the same camp. I'd love to get answers to those questions, and then I'm behind it.
Okay, so my comments in regards, I agree with what you've said. This is just like anybody else. You can pick and choose who you want to have as part of the study. That you're not going to put the bad ones on here. I get that. I'm not saying there are, but I'm sure there's some that they're being brought up that there's studies out there. And so we're not seeing the whole picture necessarily, which makes it a little difficult. I do know from our discussions, to your point, Chris, yes, we do have on our cell towers or on our water towers that we do have structures already that are there. But I also understand that people don't like it when their calls drop, and they don't like it when they lose their data service. And it's just part of our society at this point that we are trying to expand that. That's what's happening here. And these towers are regulated, and we have a difficult time in stopping this if we even wanted to, because of the rules and regs. I think you probably are aware of that too, from a statute standpoint, and Brian kind of alluded to that earlier. So for tonight, I'd like to get some answers before I act upon this. And as a matter of fact, I probably won't be acting on this then, but I won't be here the next meeting or the next meeting. This is my last meeting. So
Well, one of the things that we probably need to take a break to figure out when this application was filed. If we don't act within 90 days of the application, it's deemed approved, and that's by state law.
okay, one of those other laws that gets in the way for us. So do we know how long it's been?
I think we need to maybe take a few minutes, because as the individual had identified, there was a little back and forth as to whether or not this should be in Westport or go to the Westport Plan Commission or the Waunakee Plan Commission. And I certainly don't want to tell you that it's okay to table if I find out that 90-day period runs before the next plan commission meeting, then because by state law, it would be approved.
So it sounds like you need us to take a break for the next 5 minutes or so to get you that opportunity.
Yeah, if we could.
I guess the only other option would be if we were comfortable voting on it with the exception that we're gonna get answers to those questions. And if they're all no's.
Well, I mean, I would say this, I mean, based on the language in the CUP, if they are required, if they're state laws and regulations, then they're gonna have to abide by them. If they're not state laws and regulations, we don't have the authority to require them to abide by them, and they're gonna be able to go ahead anyway.
So
okay.
then if Mrs. Kelcher wanted to take that, she'd really need to talk to our state representatives to talk about what the rules and regs are there. If these are not part of it, is what I'm saying.
If
It's not our body that would make that determination. That's really at a state level or a federal level.
correct, we don't have the authority to make rules related to these issues. We have the authority to require the applicant to abide by them, but we don't make the rules.
So the public hearing portion is the part where we can talk from the public, but I'm trying to address your questions and what the process would be is where I'm really going with that.
The IEE 519, that information came to me from a seasoned electrician who gave me the presentation, and we're in consulting with him on that. And he said it's a state, it's international, and it's a state.
So appreciate that. So what I'm hearing for our body is that if that is indeed the case, then based on what the law is, they'll have to abide by that.
That is correct.
So, and if that satisfies your answer, which I think it satisfies all of us, actually, that helps us to move forward here.
And I would be willing to add something else. We're more than happy. The last applicant that was up here spoke about working within the community and things of that nature. I mean, I live in the Des Moines, Iowa area, but I do all my work is in Wisconsin. And the last thing I want to do is come up and pit neighbor against neighbor, have people in the community upset about these projects that we're proposing. I'm more than happy to, we oversee the construction process as well. So I'm more than happy to reach out. I have your number. I'd be more than happy to reach out and let her know when our on-air date would be. That would be our the time in which it's energized. I don't know if that would be something that you'd be interested in, but I'm more than happy to do that. You can make it a condition, so far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so with that, there's a motion that could be made. Do we have that motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the site plan and conditional use permit to construct a new cell tower at 6308 Woodland Drive as recommended by staff.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, I'm going to call the question. Brian, do you have a question? No, oh, you want like this? Okay.
So just to make it clear that anything that the Kelchers are concerned with, those specifications would have to be made in state law. Even if we approve this at this point, they still have to meet the requirements that the state of Wisconsin does.
They have to, not just the state, but also federal, and not just the statutes, but also code regulations. So we have federal statutes and code regulations and state statutes and state code regulations. This project, like all the cell towers, would have to meet all of those.
Okay.
Okay, then I'm going to call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have public hearing and discussion action on final plat and GDP SIP Heritage Hills, 4th edition, phase 5. This is also this is an item for recommendation to the village board. Tim?
Thanks, Chair Zellner. What you see on the screen is the approximate area that will be impacted by the request. The applicant is seeking approval and amendment to the GDP and SIP for Heritage Hills, along with a final plat for the 4th addition to Heritage Hills. Give me a moment. The GDP will be amended as such. So what you're seeing on the screen right now, it's a little hard to see here. So the light blue area is the area in question. This is the general development plan that was adopted originally. What they are asking for now, you can see a little slight change along that block. They're asking for essentially three things: increasing the number of single-family homes along this area by 3 units, amending one block of the alley-loaded Haven style or senior twin homes to single-family homes due to the grade constraints on this block, and then adjusting the alley-loaded single-family District 1 lots to accommodate additional housing stock through reduced area lot widths and areas, going from 37-foot wide lots to 31-foot wide, and from a minimum 3,700 square feet in area to 3,100 square feet in area. In addition, the plat itself, this is a little hard to read, will include 45 total housing units. This is a little bit confusing in that this is the fifth phase of the development, but the plat name is called the fourth addition to Heritage Hills. Anyway, the fourth edition plat would be consistent with the amended GDP as included in the application materials if approved. There is one thing I wanted to point out, since the packet went out, shown to the north of lot 156, East Verleen terminates before the edge of the easterly lot line. And so staff is recommending approval per the request of the applicant that the plat actually be expanded to include the right of way of East Verleen so that it is extended out to the edge of lot 156 so that entire lot is served by a public right of way. So with that change, staff is available for questions, and to point out for those in the audience, these materials are found on pages 29 through 48 of the packet.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So I'm going to open our public hearing.
I have one email, and if anybody in the Zoom audience wishes to speak, please raise your hand. I have an email from Brad and Trish Horning. It says, to whom it may concern, we'd like to submit this item for commission review at tomorrow's meeting. We currently live at 313 Crane Crossing and have been there for the last year. In that time, we've been witness to excessive construction traffic, which makes sense due to the infancy of the development. The part of the equation that is concerning is the entrance to the construction area and route the vehicles need to take on a daily basis. The amount of traffic is excessive. While we did expect dust and dirt with the ongoing construction, we didn't expect consistent early morning noise with construction personnel waiting and running vehicles beginning at 5:30 a.m., vehicle damage and damage to our tree lawn. We would like to request that for this next phase of the Heritage Hills subdivision, that an existing roadway be extended to Schneider. I believe they meant Schumacher in there. Be extended to Schneider Road, and that entrance be dedicated to all construction traffic. We believe this will create a safer, less obtrusive traffic pattern within the development. Thank you for your consideration. And
Okay.
at this point, I have no hands raised in the Zoom.
Okay, and that's all the forms you have?
And that's all the forms I have.
Did you want to talk?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, please state your name and address.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Brink. I am the Director of Land Development for Viridian Homes. Just wanted to come up and introduce myself. Chris Ellers is normally the one that comes in and does these parts of the meetings. He is out tonight. Wanted to start off by saying we are very much looking forward to this next phase. We went through several iterations in the planning process of it, trying to figure out the right number of lots to bring on. We always like to give a little bit of a market update as well when we come to these meetings. Demand is still very strong, as I'm sure all of you can appreciate. Trying to find the right product to bring on is something that we're always looking at as well. What we're seeing is there's continual demand for that entry-level product, first time move up, some second time move up, but with the interest rates that are continue to increase, that price sensitivity also is continuing to increase. So in coming with this design today, this is what we feel is going to meet the needs of the customers that are looking to come to Viridian, but also to Waunakee as a whole. We can look to certainly address further questions throughout this process. Our engineer and our planner are here tonight. But overall, we just wanted to say that we are very much looking forward to this next phase and continue to grow here in Waunakee. So again, I'm available for any questions.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, anybody else, public hearing wise?
Can I say more? I'm Brad Horning, my wife Tricia, we had that email from it. Can I say more or at this time or is that it?
So I'm happy to extend you. You can have 2 minutes.
Okay. Put it there.
My name's Brad Horning. I written that email with my wife, so we had just, as described in the email, a little concern with construction traffic. I didn't know the exact extent of what Veridian was, what this phase was going to do. I see that it doesn't extend over to Schneider Road there. I see a lot of different entrances into this development. And granted, it's not all developed at this point, but the entrance down there at East Main Street and Division Street is a real bad intersection. I'm guessing you guys probably got a handle on that, or you got an idea what that's like, trying to make a left turn or even cross over Main Street. Just another entrance into that development, aside from these west end, entrances, I think would go a long way. We did have some vehicle damage. We don't know exactly how it happened. The bumper got ripped off a car that was parked on the street. So there's just a lot of construction happening in that area. Even the officer that came out when we filed the police report said, wow, there's a lot going on here. So just a suggestion, if there could be a construction entrance, again, Schneider would be ideal, although with the development not extending over there, I don't know what the chance of that is, but that's all.
Thank you. So I think am I right in saying it's Schumacher, not Schneider? Just to make sure. Okay. Nope, that's just fine. Okay, then I'm going to close our public hearing at this point. Commissioners, questions? Gary, I'm going to go with you again first.
Maybe Bill can answer this one on the entrance off of 19 into is that going to be anytime soon?
Yes, there are plans to extend Branding Boulevard south onto Highway 19.
When will that be done prior to this phase beginning, or?
It will be in concert with it. So there'll be a lot going on in this phase. It will be happening throughout this summer, but not prior to the phase beginning. It'll be part of the phase.
So I know that one thing we have difficulty with is trying to tell construction people that there's a construction entrance. We have the same issue other parts of the community where even though you tell them to go somewhere else, they're going to take the shortest route depending upon where they're coming from. But I get the concerns of folks are there at 5:30 in the morning and, so to me, that's a neighborhood and a developer issue that you need to work together on to try to solve those issues.
Yes, and believe me, we've heard that, and we are certainly apologetic for that. With everything going on the site and the multifamily site as well, that is a different contractor. So there's a lot of kind of hands in the jar on this and trying to coordinate all the logistics. When that Branding Boulevard extends south and that entrance does open up, and you can take a right turn off, that'll at least open up another avenue. So that will help for sure. So it definitely will be busy this year. It is kind of an important turning point of the development overall. But when that does open up, there will be some relief at least, so it's not all coming on one side. And that is a high priority for us. There's occupancy issues that we have to work through. So we want to get this road completed as soon as we can.
Ryan, any questions?
I guess the only thing I would have is, I think in general support of the development as it has progressed, but I am starting to get a little concerned about, it seems like at every turn we come in and we add a few additional lots. And so there was a general scope and plan for the development, and now we're increasing capacity. And I can get behind that a little bit with the some of the in vogue words of workforce housing and whatnot, but I am a little concerned at how many more times we're going to be sitting here about increased lots.
Chris?
My question is probably along the same lines as what Brian just referenced. I'm wondering about the makeup now overall. Like I know there was a lot of senior housing and starter homes and progressing up to bigger homes for families as they, move through as well. I'm wondering what that makeup looks like now with these changes.
Yeah, I got Brian Munson is with Vanderwall. He's our planner. He'll have some good stats for you.
So just to talk about the process we're going through in a plat this size is not unique in that as we implement over projects, we're always trying to balance things against what's happening in the market. And I'm sure as everybody's read, the market's all sorts of fun these days. But there is still very strong demand and need for housing across the full spectrum. So as we designed this, we tried to keep that in mind. So we still have lot sizes in the mid price point range and then the entry level price point range. So you can see along the park, the change from the proposed to the adopted incorporates 3 lots along that line, but doesn't drastically alter the delivery of the single family homes in there. The bigger change is the switch from the senior haven 6 units to 6 units of single family. And that's more in response to the grade conditions with age targeted housing. Number of steps is of course a critical question. In this case, just because of course, as everybody's seen the site, the grade wasn't able to be compressed to a point where there were too many treads in the house to satisfy a senior targeted buyer. And so by switching those to single family, still keeps in the context and character of the neighborhood. But again, it's only 6 units in this case. And I would note, if you notice to the east, there are still significant portions of the plat that will include both opportunities for additional front load and alley loaded haven product, as well as the full range and spectrum of housing. So the addition of the 2 lots in the previous replats, very comparable in effort to what you see here. Again, try to keep that balance and really deliver different types of housing within the neighborhood, but making sure that any amendments in the neighborhood don't alter the character of the overall neighborhood. So we still have a significant portion of the unit. You can see the percentages a little bit hard to read here, but we still have a significant portion of this project in delivery of single family at all points of the spectrum. You can see a fairly balanced percentages in terms of the brackets of the types of housing in there. So you still see that spread throughout the neighborhood. You also still see significant portions of haven in the yet to be built portions of the neighborhood.
Can you help me understand where the ones that were for senior housing have been changed? Which ones are those?
So I'll step over quick. It's this block right here.
That's more than 6 though.
Yes, it was 6 senior, it's a 1-for-1 unit change from what the approved units in senior were 6 senior town twin homes to 12 single family. So the same number of housing units.
And where's the anticipated cutoff of the entrance off of 19 for this year?
Dan, do you want to speak to the construction timing of that?
I'm just curious as how that impacts the additional entrance and how far they're gonna get into. And have I'm not even sure what they're listed as,
Good evening, sorry, Brian.
not even sure what the ones but just north of the apartment development.
So
those-
yes, all of those north of the apartment
Now?
have been built. The roadway has been extended to Bryanig. And then this spring, we're gonna complete, spring into summer, complete Bryanig down to East Main Street. Do the workout on Main Street that we need to do and at Division and Main also. So that's the plan of attack. We can get the DOT to issue our permits here, which we've put a lot of pressure on them here in the last couple of weeks. And Division going north actually also is going to be connected in this year too, is the plan.
Kevin?
Just because there's been so many changes over the process of this, do we feel the density is what we originally approved? Has it changed from the original density?
I think,
I can't keep
Brian,
straight.
am I right? We've gone up 5 units total. So from, I think right now we're at total of 684 units. I think we were 679 under original approval.
So Joe arrived. Do you have any questions, Joe?
The only thing that came to mind, and I apologize for being late, had another committee meeting. As you put in, I guess, the northeast side of that, currently, I think that's where the gravel piles and everything else are. Does some of that need to be filled in, and sort of what's the plan with what's there? Does it just move to the east?
You're exactly right. We're probably starting next week to move the gravel pile that sits where phase 5 is at right now. And that's going to start to be relocated and moved out to the east where we've got some land set aside that we can use it a little bit further to the east.
Okay.
So yes, that big gravel pile is going to be relocated.
Is there any blasting or anything that will have to go along with that?
We're going to have to do some minor blasting for utilities in a couple of areas, but nothing like was done in the past.
I think I got everybody. You mentioned entry level pricing right now. What is entry level pricing currently?
I figured that would come up. So the market's interesting on the construction side. So what we're seeing is the vertical construction, the wood, the sticks and bricks and all that, that's come down to pre-pandemic-ish levels, about 30% down from where it was at the peak. The underground stuff is not. So all of your ductile iron piping, PVC, the stuff you don't see, that's up about 30%-ish, give or take. So it's kind of a wash overall. So the pricing that we're seeing in Heritage Hills now, that's not going to change a lot. I cannot say anything publicly as to what pricing will be, other than it'll be in the same ranges that are being offered out there currently. There's just too much in flux right now, but we wanted to provide the update that, again, the vertical construction side is coming down, lumber's down, price per 1,000 board feet. However, the underground piping, that is up about the same. So we don't expect pricing to fluctuate dramatically from what is out there currently.
So then, since you can't put that out there publicly, my question is, from when everything was originally approved, there was price points given of where housing would be.
Yeah.
Where are those price points today compared to where they originally were forecast?
Yeah, so
Certainly higher.
yes. What we've budgeted this year on, I'll give you the land side, for example. So again, what we're budgeting for construction cost is up 20 to 30%, depending upon what the line item is. Pricing overall has gone up 15%, maybe 20% from when this started way back when. So prices have gone up. We do our absolute best to keep margins to the point where we're not having to pass that along to the customer, certainly as long as we can. That's what we're known for. Dane County as a whole and Waunakee in general needs this price point. Recognize that it's critical to us to maintain that price point, and we do everything we can. So it has gone up overall, but we try to keep that as low as we can and try to absorb as much as we can on our side.
So any concerns with from staff with the widths of these lots going from 37 to 31 feet and the kind of condensing? I mean, I look at it and say, all right, it's a great move if I'm a business person, because I'm putting two things there versus one, and I can charge. Okay, I'm going to charge less, but I'm going to have two instead of one. So to me, I mean, I understand the business side of that, but from a looks, aesthetics, and how much is being jammed there, what's our staff's feeling on that?
I think that this provides an opportunity to have another housing product. Is this too tight, if you will? I think that's subjective. I think in your packet, again, the materials here are 49 through pages 29 through 48. There are some illustrations, and Brian may speak to the neighborhood where they came from. But we pose that question to Waunakee utility staff for easement provision and so forth, and they're comfortable with that. I think it's certainly smaller than what is common in Waunakee, but is it too small? I don't think so. I think it again offers another choice for residents who want to move into Waunakee.
What was the setback on 31?
I think it's 15 or 20 off the front,
I'm sorry,
sides, five.
So if I guess if I could speak a little bit to that, this is a product that we've been developing over several years, and it really does get to that point of trying to deliver more affordable housing options. To describe how this works, if you look at the pictures that were in the packet, there are 31s interspersed with 37 and 45s in all of those pictures. The reason I use those pictures is to illustrate that effectively the differential is entirely within the width of the house. So the side yards, all the yard requirements are identical to the other homes. But when you look at these in a collection of houses, it's very difficult to tell the difference, which is a little bit shorter than I am in terms of the width of house that's been reduced. But it's really important towards the ability to spread a lot of costs over a bigger sales base. And that's a mechanism Viridian's been using to try to offset some of those rising construction costs. So in essence, we have the same linear footage of streets. We have, yes, more houses for sale, but we're selling them at a smaller square footage, which allows the price per square foot to come down on those houses when they're brought to market. So it's a mechanism, and I guess kind of stepping back to the overall approach of why we're here asking for 3 more lots is because we're trying to continue to adapt to bring price points in line with delivery of attainable housing. If we simply said, well, that was the plat, we've got to now higher costs on the same number of lots, we know that the house costs have to go up. By integrating a few more carefully identified sites that are still in the context of the neighborhood, it helps spread some of those costs across more home sales, which allows us to bring the price point per house down and try to keep that original promise of having diversified housing in here continuing into the future. So the 31-foot wide house, as we said, was designed very carefully. It has been built in several neighborhoods in Madison as well as in Fitchburg. It's been accepted into the market quite well. And in fact, when you go down the streets, they're very difficult to pick out.
One thing into Brad's comment earlier about, a development of this size, we may want to look at, depending upon what your next phases are going to be, that we do develop some strategy that says, hey, we need to get an access for construction off of Schumacher Road is an option. Because if we continue just to come from the west and we continue to go this way, construction traffic is, going to be just increasing over the years. So we might want to have some kind of strategy with you guys to have Schumacher developer road access for construction for the other half of this development. So, the neighborhood isn't getting so much traffic, just as an option.
That's something we'll certainly look at. We got several things we're balancing between, land purchases from the Breinigs and, where we're going next with our phasing in 24 and all that sort of fun stuff. So those things are obviously all in the air of what to talk about. I'm not saying next year we would plow out to Schumacher yet, but it's not going to be too far off because once we break east of Breinig, it's going to be natural that we need to connect out that way.
Okay, so any other questions?
Do you anticipate that being the only addition this year?
Yes. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I was thinking through everything. Yes, that we have not contemplated anything besides this phase 5 for this year.
Ryan, do we have the ability to? I know we have the ability to ask, of course. I would like to see that highway Q thing done like before this gets going.
Q?
Not Q. 19. The entry in.
So
can we stage it that we just put a requirement on that gets done?
I believe the village board approved an amendment to the development agreements. I want to say maybe in February, that all of that work is going to be done by August of this year. They're working in conjunction with the DOT on that.
Where are we at in that process with the DOT?
I'm trying to get them to reply to me right now. No, actually, we've had plans in front of them for a significant amount of time. We've gotten review comments back from them. We've got questions back to them on trying to do that, pushing the DOT right now to try to get our permits in hand here in early May so we can let loose and as soon as that we've got those permits. Because I think we're, like Brian said, and I think we're in an early August, late July deadline on that DA. So yes, that's what we're trying to do.
I just think that's important with regards to all of our neighbors on Division Street that have had the trucks for the last.
We concur. And agree
And
completely.
yeah, so if we can get that done, that would be much appreciated. So in holding that, I struggle with the entry level pricing. One of the things that we were trying to bring, I know, and you were trying to bring as well, was that attainable housing, affordable housing, workforce housing. There's all different names, terminology for it. And I just see, all right, we're gonna shrink the lot size, but we're still probably gonna end up paying more than the original pricing for those homes than what was forecast. So I'm having a hard time with that one, just putting that out there to you. at this point, so. But I'm only one member, so. Gary,
Chris, I'll make a motion to approve this GDP for the fourth edition of the Heritage Hills plat. The village board, along with the SIP for staff recommendations, approval of the fourth edition plat and the SIP shall be contingent upon the approval of the amended GDP.
okay, so we have a motion
Second.
and a second. Okay, I'm gonna call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Okay. Next, we have a discussion action on a request by Village on Main LLC to convert first floor commercial space into a commercial condominium plat 703 West Main Street. This is an item for recommendation to the village board. Todd?
Thanks,
Go ahead,
Chair Zellner. Yes, the applicant does wish to convert the existing commercial space located at 703 West Main. It's actually the change in ownership, not a change in use. So it's simply going from a tenant space to a condominium space. Included in the packet, again, the materials are found on pages 49 through 114 of the packet, inclusive of the condo declaration documents as well as the condo plat. This is a pretty straightforward request from staff's perspective. The space that is there currently about 1,156 square feet. Again, no change in use. It's just a change in the form of ownership. One thing I'd like to point out on the cover sheet for the report, there was a notation that staff is awaiting a final change to the condo declaration regarding vehicles, trailers, and RVs encroaching into the parking lot. Since the packet went out, we did receive that update, and it is amenable to what staff was talking about. Essentially, it says vehicles, trailers, and RVs essentially can't protrude out into the drive aisle. So we want to make sure that single entrance point from Main Street is kept free and clear. So with that, staff is recommending approval. This would be going to the village board for final action.
Okay, commission members, questions? Or if you're good with it, we can make a motion. All right, I'll rephrase. Are there any questions or concerns that people have? Do we have a motion then? Ryan, do you have any
I was
comments?
just gonna say, if it's helpful for you all, there's nothing that they're proposing here that's inconsistent with the development agreement between the village and the property owner.
Here, Chris. I'll make a motion to recommend the village board approval of commercial condominium plat subject to final review by the community development director and village attorney.
Motion by Gary Hertzberg. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Kevin Phelps. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. All right, next we have discuss an action on preliminary plat and GDP SIP Kilkenny Farms West, south of Woodland Drive and west of South Century Avenue. This is item for recommendation to the village board.
Thanks again, Chair Zellner. So what you see on the screen right now represents the plan for this development, Kilkenny Farms West, located south of Woodland Drive and west of South Century Avenue. The proposal includes 324 total lots, broken out as 281 residential lots, 2 commercial lots, 1 mixed-use lot, and 40 outlots. And the outlots are primarily intended to fulfill open space and stormwater management requirements. As noted on the in the staff report, there are a couple of issues unresolved yet that the commission may wish to consider. One has to do with land use. There is a proposal for in the what's called District 4, back up. That's identified for mixed use. Generally, that's consistent with the comprehensive plan. However, staff is recommending that as currently drafted, if multifamily uses are allowed in that area, they are allowed through approval of a CUP process, as well as include a component of non-residential use, which is consistent with several other developments along Main Street. In addition, there is included in the packet, this information is found on pages 115 through 160. Recommendations from our village engineering firm for a traffic impact analysis. That has not been reviewed yet. So staff recommends that the applicant's final plat be consistent with recommendations found from that traffic study. I think those are the primary issues associated with this. Staff's available for questions.
Joe, I'm going to give you the first shot this time.
I've got nothing yet.
Brian,
Can I just make just a couple of updates for the plan commission based on the map that's up there? Based on some discussions the village board has had related to the land that's kind of at the bottom left is not in the village yet, that there's going to be an annexation ordinance, an annexation agreement going to the village board a week from tonight. Related to some things on that, if you look in the middle, there's a park that's approximately 1.92 acres. Initially in the concept plan, there was a lot, an additional lot. It was formerly named lot 90. We've worked with the developers such that that land that used to be the former lot 90 is going to be part of the park. And I think it's actually been added already in this concept plan. There will be some form of water facilities going there, whether it's a water tower or water storage tank. So just want to make you aware of that. And that was something that staff and the developer worked through together. Another thing on this, per the request by the village board, I don't necessarily think that this requires a change to the plat, but it will impact the plans. You see that there are streets H and K and D there. We're going to make sure that those have the same pavement width as, is it Eldora Lane? Just to make sure that EMS and fire have easy access to that 11 acre or 10.59 acre park, and then all of the land down in the Beckerjack, what we refer to as the Beckerjack property. That was another request by the village board. And so that will be, that relates to the Beckerjack annexation agreement, but also will play a role here. The only comments that I have regarding the GDP are really twofold in your packet. One is, and we've worked with the developer on this in the past. I can't recall if it was the Arboretum Village development or the Golden Ponds or possibly both of them. Within our code, we have language that, I'm paraphrasing, that essentially says, if you want to do a PUD, please lay out and explain to us how the proposals that you have in your document are different than in our existing code. And doubling up on that, there's certain language within the GDP that says effectively, look, if the language in the GDP is inconsistent with the village code, then the language in the GDP applies. We at a staff level just need to work through with them, and we need to get from them the supplement that we've received before that says, okay, here's what the differences are so that we can fully evaluate that. I don't think that prevents you from moving forward tonight. That would just be a condition of approval, but I just wanted to flag it for you. And then, I think we had a comment from this, and this is obviously, first of all, I agree with what Tim said regarding the mixed use lot. That would require a change in the GDP regarding making multifamily a conditional use. There's other places in the GDP where we have had, whether it's outdoor patios or drive-throughs. I think we have to acknowledge that there are some times that we've made those as not conditional uses in PUDs. I think that's the case in Kilkenny Commons, but then in other places we have made them as conditional uses, and they are conditional uses in our zoning code. And I do believe it's beneficial to the village to have those as conditional uses. It's identified within the GDP to make those essentially approved as part of site plans. The other alternative is to make clear in the GDP that even if these are not going to be conditional uses, there's an understanding that whatever we would put in a conditional use, we have the authority to place as a condition of an SIP. We can probably get to the same spot then, but those are the two issues in the GDP I wanted to flag.
Okay. So a couple quick things then. So the water tower or storage facility, is that land being donated to the village?
Well, it would not be donated. So in our village code, obviously, we have certain requirements for all developers to put in what I would call standard public utility improvements to serve the developments. A water tower or water storage of this size, we don't have the ability just to require it. We would have to essentially pay for it. But as part of at least what we've worked on with the developer and is what will be in the annexation agreement that would come to the board next week, we've effectively acquired the property by waiving the utility, agreeing to waive certain costs for sanitary sewer improvements that have been made off-site that we do believe that we would have the ability to apply to this property, and staff believes that the trade-off of the cost of the land that we're acquiring and the fees that we're waiving are sufficient, that it makes it a fair trade.
And that site was identified by Strand as the best site?
That site was identified by Strand as the best site and confirmed by Waunakee Utilities that that's where they would like it to go.
Okay. And the street width, you said it's Eldora Lane. Do we know what that width is?
I can try to find that. Well,
36.
Bill Fredericks just said that it's 36 feet. So it's the law at this point, 36 feet. Okay. I think Mrs. Ashmore, one of her questions was in regards to our comprehensive plan and that the mixed use portion is not commercial like it states in there. Is that what you were referring to, Brian, that we'd have to change?
So I think it's two separate issues. One is within the GDP on page 6 of the GDP. Let me try to find it in your packet. Just 1 second. Looks like that is page 133 of your packet. Subsection J is identified as multifamily, and it would be identified as a permitted use. I think staff's position is twofold on that, and Tim already touched on it. One is within our C1 district of our current zoning code, multifamily is a conditional use. And so we would want that to remain the same. And this, I guess this ties back to the language in the comp plan. So when you look at the comp plan, and I know you guys don't have this before you, but it's page 74 of chapter 5. We have a section that identifies, okay, commercial uses, and we talk about what we want to see in the commercial use category. And it says land uses within commercial planning areas should be uses permitted in the C1 and C2 districts, and then it goes on. Well, if you recall, on the other side of Q, just on the other side of the Kramer development, we have a multi-use development that's going in there, and that is also in it's in commercial. And we allowed multifamily there, I believe, as a conditional use. So I think from a staff's perspective, we think the two are relatively the same, but we also believe that it should not just be a permitted use, it should be a conditional use. So the GDP would be amended in that way. And consistent with what we just did, took some action on the Cohen-Esri project. The Cohen-Esri project, multifamily was allowed in C1 as a conditional use, but as part of that, we said we want a component of commercial, and that goes back to language that is in our code and for the C1 district, where whenever we're acting on a conditional use, essentially we're supposed to look back and look at the purpose language for the district that it's in. And when you look at the C1 district, it talks about the purpose of the C1 general commercial district is to accommodate a wide range of retail, commercial service and product establishments. It is also intended to accommodate the development of mixed land uses that will allow the combination of commercial and residential uses in the same structure. So that was the language that we relied upon when we were talking with Cohen-Esri that says, hey, we'll allow mixed use as a conditional use, but we want a component of commercial in it. That's the same analysis that Tim was referring to before on how we would like to see this GDP changed. Again, multifamily allowed up in that purple area, but make it a conditional use and make sure that there needs to be some form of commercial aspect to it.
So maybe if you guys could give us options for this evening on how it would look for what the options we have to make for a decision tonight. If there was a motion that was going to come, this is before everybody asks questions. I'm just trying to help them to formulate their questions off of it. So what are the options that we would have in front of us and how would they read?
So I think, so now I'm going back up to page. Just get there. Page 116. So I mean, ultimately, I think if you were inclined to move this forward tonight, it would be a motion, effectively motion to approve the preliminary plat and general development plan and specific implementation plan for Kilkenny Farms West, subject to final review and approval by the community development director and village attorney. So we would start there. And then to the extent that you want to provide specific guidance on the, what changes you may want to see to the GDP, for example, the one that we just walked through, we would be able to bullet point those as part of the motion to be able to give staff more guidance. And then as staff goes to the board next week to address this, then they would be able to pull out those specific bullet points and say, yes, it was approved, subject to final review and approval by the community development director, but here are the specific things that the plan commission was looking at. And some of those are also going to be within the staff memo that Tim put together, I think. And so obviously you may have other questions, but one thing I think you will probably want to do is work through the different components of the staff memo that's in your packet and maybe give guidance to staff on each of those.
Okay, I don't usually go first, but I'm just going to finish where I started there. So has utilities weighed in on this yet? I know the utility commission meets coming up, but have they weighed in? Is this a project that can be done in the timeframes that they're looking at here?
On the proposal, the utilities have been involved in the discussions.
So my question is, do they have the ability with when this is all being approved to also take care of things on the utility side of the world?
They would, I think we would have to, depending on as Terry mentioned, Tracy mentioned, I'm sorry, this will go to, really your recommendation is to joint plan commission and then joint plan commission to the village board. Depending, I think generally utilities is okay with this. I think that's the comments that we've received back. To the extent that they have any further comments or they need to chime in based on what you guys say tonight, we would have the ability to do that this week.
Okay. Gary.
No, I think I'm good.
Brian?
I'm good.
Kevin?
I don't have anything.
Joe?
I'd like to hear a little bit more about the water storage, whatever we can share about that. We know what that might look like. What's in that agreement? That's
so what'll be in the agreement that's going to go to the board is essentially the compensation trade. Again, we didn't have the ability to require the dedication. We had to pay for it in some way, shape, or form. So we worked that out. The utility does not know exactly right now whether it will be above ground or below ground. However, the utility and the village will have sole discretion to make that determination at that time. I think it's something that they're still evaluating. I think that they'll probably have to look, I'm sure there are going to be cost related issues. Can they go underground? I'm not sure what the soils are like, but at the end of the day, the utility and the village are going to have sole discretion as to make that specific decision.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
Is there a necessary timing on that, on how that relates to the development as a whole?
I'm not sure if we know that. I know one of the things that we have talked about with the developer and with the utilities is it would be preferential to have that go in before neighboring lots. I think we've had many discussions at the plan commission and the village board level. It's always better to put in the improvements first and then have the homes come later, as opposed to try to put in the improvements later, because that sometimes upsets the property owners. But I don't know. I don't think that they know exactly when it's going to occur.
So maybe our developers are here and I see Mike is here. Do you have this staged at this point? With utilities and such?
Good evening. So I'm Matt Schreiner with Veer Baker Associates, the lead civil engineer on the project. So we've been working closely with Waunakee Utilities, and what we heard from them was that right now, the existing village system has the capacity to serve this entire development, but their future projections show that they'll be in a deficit in this particular area of the village. And so what we heard from them was the well may need to come on board within 7 years, and then the storage would come on board sometime after that.
Okay. Thank you. That helps immensely. Chris?
So it sounds like that mixed use could have some component of multifamily, but just for sake of discussion right now, assuming it's not multifamily, what does that do to the percentage of single family to multifamily in the village? You know, like adding all these lots and houses, do you know what the single family to multifamily might look like?
To the ratio, since there's no specifics regarding number of multifamily units, it's hard to answer that question.
Yeah, so just assuming that mixed use is no multifamily.
Is what no
No
multifamily?
multifamily, do you know what that would do?
Not if I'd have to go back and look at our spreadsheets.
I mean, I was just looking at this, and Tracy is the keeper of the records, but I think with Woodland Crest and what's Viridian's?
Yeah.
Heritage Hills. I think that gets us back above the 75-25 mix that we've wanted. And so I'm not even sure if, adding these, whatever this is, 324 lots, if it, gets as much out of skew. If we don't put multifamily there. But Tracy's the keeper of that, so.
Go ahead, Brian.
I would just say that when you were going through your housing study, and one of the things you were analyzing was that ratio is, I know for a fact that probably all of these single family homes were a component of that ratio. I don't know if the multifamily was, but I'm going to concur with saying that having all this single family doesn't necessarily skew that ratio in any material way because it was anticipated.
Yeah. And then those two commercial lots, is that still planned to be a quick trip? Do you know what the other one might be?
That's questionable, which.
Yeah, there's no final end users identified at this time. Okay.
Okay, with that said, go ahead, Tim.
Just wanted to add one thing in terms of additional contingencies or conditions, is that this be contingent, as Brian mentioned, the 40-acre parcel to the west is currently not in the village. So I think one of the conditions would be that this would be applicable contingent upon the annexation of those lands.
So that has been before the plan commission and the joint plan commission. So what is the timing? The next board meeting, and has the town of Westport already concurred, or where are we at there?
Yeah, so good question. We're in the process of working through the annexation agreement with the developer, and the plan is that this whole package, inclusive of the annexation and annexation agreement, go before the board next Monday on the 17th.
And I believe that's on the joint tomorrow too, isn't it?
Yes.
This item is on the joint.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, when you talk about the GDP and stuff, and you talk about the mixed use area, so do we treat that as commercial for basis of this motion, or do you have a recommended motion based on that?
Well, I mean, again, I would say it's per your discussion. In other words, if you agree with what Tim has put in the staff memo, and just to paraphrase it, I mean, I think he looked at that mixed use and he said, yeah, it's consistent, or at least arguably consistent with the comprehensive plan. I mean, truth be told, neither of us worked on the comprehensive plan. So if you all looked at that and you said, boy, I don't agree that multifamily is consistent with that, obviously you get to have a voice on that issue. As we looked at it, and as we looked at the comprehensive plan and some of the other approvals on County Highway Q, there is definitely a path that supports the multifamily. Again, although I would just stress, I do believe it's important to keep it as a conditional use and that it should have a component of commercial in it to be consistent with other approvals that we've had previously.
There was one you had like the districts on there, and is that the page before this?
So while you're looking, Brian, Billy, did you have a clarification you wanted to make?
I do. I actually looked up the actual road width of Eldora is 35 feet from face of curb to face of curve, and it's 31 feet of asphalt. Okay.
He's accurate. I put you on the spot. Thank you. Okay, other comments in regards to this? Otherwise, we're gonna probably need help with how to word this motion.
Well, so the start is motion to recommend approval of the GDP, SIP and preliminary plat to the Joint Plan Commission and the Village Board, subject to final review and approval by the Community Development Director and the Village Attorney, and conditioned upon annexation of the Becker Jack 40 acres. That's where we're at now. I would say that, I mean, we've had the discussion about staff's position or what we've stated in the memo regarding the mixed use. I haven't heard any disagreement necessarily. And so if there's not disagreement, then I mean, I would operate under the belief that the information that's in the staff memo is consistent with the Plan Commission's position is consistent with the information that's in the staff memo. The other. Yeah. Oh, maybe you want to comment on that.
Yeah, and then to tag along what Brian said, so since the TIA has not been available for review yet, our recommendation is that those recommendations be implemented and part of this development. And so that may result in a change to the plat on some of the outlying roads, turn lanes and so forth, but we don't know that yet. So without knowing that, our recommendation is that whatever the recommendations come from the TIA be implemented as part of this development.
Okay.
I was just going to say, so maybe as it's motion to recommend approval to the Joint Planning Commission and the Village Board of the GDP, SIP and preliminary plats, subject to final review and approval by the Community Development Director and Village Attorney, and recommendations of the traffic impact analysis, if any, be incorporated to the satisfaction of the Community Development Director and conditioned upon annexation of the Becker Jack 40 acres.
Okay, so moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Brian, was that you?
Yes.
Okay, and you have another comment?
Well, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Is this the time, appropriate time?
Yeah. After
So
second,
the
yeah.
building envelopes of the lots and stuff will be, because I didn't see anything in here about that per se, or did I miss that? Like setbacks and whatnot, because I think that was one of the questions brought up earlier. And as a reference, because we just talked about Meridian, so I'm just curious on that.
Some of that language was likely spelled out in the SIP with setbacks. That'll be further spelled out with the final plat, but information should be included in the SIP as well as any covenants. That's been, I guess, traditionally the way
And
of
if
these
I
types
may,
of developments.
if I may, Commissioner, so this plan that shows the district does actually include all of the center column shows all the proposed standards, and those are all the setbacks for each district. And then the far right is the comparable setback standard within the village code. So R2, for example, is shown on the far right-hand side. You can see our setbacks are matching up with what the existing R2 setbacks are. There are some differences, and those are spelled out within the proposed standard column in the middle. And that's part of the reason for the PUD.
We're using tierney schedule setbacks.
Okay, any other questions? And I'll remind you to use your green button. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. Yeah, hour and 15 minutes. We're halfway. Discuss action on site plan newcomer supply, lot 12, Waunakee Business Park. This is a item for final action by the Plan Commission. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Chair Zollner. The applicants are seeking approval of an SIP to construct a two-story, 34,000 square foot building inclusive of lab, office and warehousing space on lot 12, which is shown on the screen. This is a lot immediately west of DCAR on the north side of Unique. The site plan, so this is what's shown on the screen right now, are renderings of what the building would look like. Very nice building, a lot of brick along, especially along the primary facade on Prairie View Court. The architecture would fit in very well with the existing buildings in the business park. The well-appointed building is consistent with business park design standards and integrates well into adjacent buildings. The site is, as soon as we get there, this is an overall layout of the site plan. There is a truck entrance along Unique on the south side of the site, which allows for turning movements of vehicles. There is only really one bay associated with the warehouse component for ingress and egress of vehicles. As you can see, there is land for future expansion of the building as well as future parking to accommodate or to go in conjunction with that future building expansion. The site is, here's a utility plan. This is again in your packet. Materials are found on pages 161 through 181. The landscaping is a very well appointed site. There is a very nice courtyard for employees on the northeast portion of the site. So very well appointed again for the proposed use consistent with business park covenants. And I think this would be a great addition to the business park. And I'd just like to point out the owners are here with us this evening. Todd, our administrator, and I met with them several weeks ago and learned of their story. So very impressive story. This would be their new headquarters.
Well, thank you for being here tonight and for coming to Waunakee. My question, how many employees will you have here?
So we currently have 41 on the books. If we were to max out this building on this lot, we would guess at about 100.
About 100?
That's
And-
why we put it at about a 20% discount in the second shift as well.
Oh. I'm sorry. I had 3 people pointing at me over here.
No, I'm sorry.
I'm like, what?
Do I need to hit the button or does it do it?
Is it green? If it's green, you're good.
Okay. So we currently have 41 employees on the books. And if we were to think about this building at its max might be about 100.
Okay, and that's great news to hear right off the bat. I like the positive trend of saying we're gonna go up to 100. That's great.
Well, it might take us a little bit of time to do that, though. It's not.
Understood.
We're a slow grow interval kind of company, but that would be the idea of this being maybe as long as a 20 to 25 year facility. So we've been in Middleton since 2002.
Okay.
So we were in a rental just down the street in the Middleton Business Park for about 4 or 5 years. Then we had an arrangement to be the primary leasee in combination with the owner in our half of the space. And it afforded us the ability to have a small laboratory within what would be a very modest and moderate affordable leasee, which has allowed our company to grow in a way and be able to provide a service in a way that's very difficult for a lot of people in this town and our ability to accomplish laboratory space. So we look at this building, it's always important to understand that, yeah, it's office and it's warehouse, but it's also a very unique circumstance to be able within our size of a company to take this next step to have a functioning laboratory at this scale.
And what are your typical hours of operations?
So our lab can start as early as 5:30. We'll go as late as 7 o'clock at night right now. Because we're so constrained in space at our current facility, we're likely to be moving into in the next 2 to 3 months into attempting to do at least a partial second shift. So it won't be in full duplicate of the amount of staffing we have in a first shift, but we understand at least, because even moving this building will take time, that we'll need to accomplish the successful second shift before then. And it's a possibility that as we move into this building, we might be continuing that practice because it serves a couple different interests in regards to the efficacy of the lab.
Perfect. Thank you. Other commission questions?
No, I think it's a great plan. Great to see a new business coming this way.
I'm curious, from the lab standpoint, is there any sort of chemistry, anything else that we need to be?
Yes, sir. So within the lab, we will have open chemistry use. So we are not in and of itself manufacturing chemistry. We use chemistry as an input within the histology practice. So we will be safely and correctly storing and using chemistry within that lab. But so for example, this is about a 5 to 5,500 square foot lab. We currently operate in about 1,100 square feet in our current facility. By the designation of our use, at least I can partly explain how low volume our chemistry use is to explain that by our waste that we need to dispose of, we are considered a very small quantity generator within the state of Wisconsin. So even though we're getting into this bigger lab, a lot of what histology ends up doing is very human powered interaction with the process. It's not a high level, high volume chemistry operation, but the responsibilities to chemistry will always be managed and hopefully kept at as small and effective a version of its use within that space. We also sell chemistry. So within our warehouse, we will have closed chemistry that comes in. We don't mix it, we don't make it on site, but we will be bringing it in, storing it within the warehouse, and it will be outbound in order fulfillment to our customers because we are a reseller, we're a contract manufacturer, and we're originating manufacturer of supplies and histology.
Excellent. Is there any concern from EMS, fire, anything about that?
They did not note any, no concerns noted from those
Okay.
departments.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Others? Kevin, any questions?
No, it's a beautiful building.
Thanks.
Brian?
Well, the architect's there. That's Doug.
Well done.
Yeah, it looks like it fits the area, so good.
Chris? Gary?
Nope.
All good? Okay, so I'm gonna make the motion.
Go for it.
2 in a row for me. That is the first time in my history there are 2 in a row, I think. Motion to approve the SIP for Lot 12, Waunakee Business Park Phase 2, subject to all outstanding staff concerns being addressed to the satisfaction of the village engineer.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Welcome to Waunakee. Welcome your business to Waunakee. And I'm glad you're here too. All right. Next, we have discussion action on final draft of lighting ordinance amendment. This is an item for recommendation to the village board. Did he bring graphs and we didn't look at them? Oh, I feel bad now. Look at that. Oh, well. Okay, Tim, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Chair Zellner. The commission evaluated the first draft of a lighting ordinance at a previous meeting. And at that time, it was postponed to get more feedback from the school district. Since that time, we did get some feedback from the district, and some of those things are noted on the cover sheet of the staff report with respect to the setback for lighting structures specific to athletic fields, as well as the timing of those. And staff is recommending what was originally drafted. So this information is found on pages 182 through 196 of the packet. What the school district said is their preference is that the currently proposed 45-foot setback for those lighting structures be reduced to 30 feet. And then in addition, the timing, the district is asking the use of the athletic field lighting extend to 11 p.m. versus 10:30 p.m. as currently drafted. Staff was recommending we adhere to both of them. One regarding the timing, there's already a sort of an outlet for an extension of the way the current draft is written for 30 minutes, coupled with the ability of people and organizations to get exceptions granted by the village board to extend that timing. In terms of the distance setback for the athletic field lighting, I guess in staff's judgment, if a lighting pole is allowed at 90 feet, 30 feet seems relatively close, especially to a residential site. That 45 feet allows for some more light cutoff, as well as the opportunity to provide vegetative buffer between that proposed lighting and a residential use. There was one comment submitted at the last public hearing related to color temperature. So on page 196 of your packet, and I don't have it on the screen, but page 196 is an attachment that I've found from one of the, thank you, yep, that shows a color spectrum range. And the comment was asking the Plan Commission to consider a consistent standard throughout the village for lighting. Staff's judgment, that would be a difficult thing to enforce. What, I guess the question would be, what would your tolerance be for a color temperature range? Those color temperatures are measured in degrees Kelvin. For example, it goes on the warm end of the spectrum, I'll say 3,000 degrees Kelvin up to, 7,000 plus for blue or cooler lighting. That in our staff's judgment is a very subjective thing. I think if the village wishes to have consistency be a priority, public ways, public parks, et cetera, public lands owned by the village, that would make sense. However, on private property, that would be an enforcement conundrum, perhaps I'd say. So staff is not necessarily recommending any inclusion of specific standards related to color temperature. But the draft proposal of the lighting ordinance is in your packet, and we are recommending approval of that.
Commission members, any questions?
I get that color. And it'd be nice to have at least some type of direction. They come into these signs that, in personal opinion, when they get really bright, it has a lot of impact with people around and everything. So I don't know how you set a certain level, but it sure be good to have that discussion at the plan. To make sure that everybody's comfortable with it, it's in that area that, they surround that business or whoever put the sign up.
So there's two, I would respond by saying there's two pieces to that. One, brightness or luminance level is one thing, color temperature is another. What's proposed in the draft ordinance is a fairly significant drop from what is currently allowed, 3-foot candles at the property line down to 0.5. So I think that's consistent with a lot of communities around the area. I think that would really help to bring that brightness down, as well as requirements for lighting elements and fixtures to be downcast and shielded, so that really concentrates the light spill to that individual property.
Any other questions? Or look for a motion?
And make a motion to recommend the village board approve the changes to chapter 133 as presented regarding exterior lighting standards.
Okay, we have a motion by Gary Hertzberg. Do we have a second? I'll make the second.
So as we're looking at the village board packet, one of the things that is commented on is the exterior lighting associated with athletic fields or other open space uses. It does not appear to us that the version of the ordinance that is in the packet right now has the updated, and so that's section 133-1304. There is a different section. I think that section was updated. Do you want to give us just like 5 minutes to try to find it?
This?
Yeah, it's got more to it now. I think we should probably maybe just pause for 5 minutes so that we can try to find it, so that you guys have clarity on the recommendation that you're making. Because that is what the school district was commenting on, is the updated language.
I'm assuming that's regarding the 45-foot setback and
Correct.
And the 30 minutes longer one.
Yep.
So I think we should just go try to find it.
Okay, so it's 7:30. We're gonna take a short pause. And I can tell you, in my 10 years on the planning commission, I've never been asked to pause a meeting before.
Like that.
So this is twice in one night on the last night. This is cool.
Yeah, but the first time we didn't, and now we actually
We are actually doing it. All right, we have a pause. I'll get some more water.
Water. Everybody.
It's 7:40. Tim,
All right, I apologize for that.
we have a motion in a second. So right now we're just in conversation.
Conversation so that you can conversation so you can see the updated language, and
Correct.
obviously you still have the ability to discuss it.
So you have to take a couple minutes to go through this again. Apologize for not including this. So this is specific to that section being 133-1304, specific to exterior lighting associated with athletic fields and other open space uses. And one thing to point out too, that these standards would be applicable to village facilities as well. So lighting in village parks and so forth. So applicability is all exterior lighting located on lands used for athletic fields, for other open space uses shall be subject to rules and regulations enumerated herein. Minimum distance, 40, again, there's the 45 feet from the property line, adjacent to residential uses. Height of any light structure shall not exceed 90 feet measured from grade. Hours of operation, limited as follows until 10:30 PM. Exceptions, as I pointed out earlier, exceptions may be granted by the village board. And then sub B, in the event of unforeseen circumstances, lighting may be extended for an additional 30 minutes. So I think that's common overtime or tournaments and so forth. So light structures shall use cutoff or directional shielded lighting. All lamps shall be aimed downward athletic field to minimize glare, light trespass onto adjacent properties. Light trespass created by the light structure shall not exceed 0.25 vertical foot candles at any adjacent residential property. Owner shall provide a buffering plan to utilize meet the performance requirements set forth in herein. Opaque fencing to a height of not more than 8 feet shall be permitted up to an exterior lot line to meet the light trespass requirements. Let's see, in the event the owner relocates portable light structure, is required to submit an amended lighting plan. So this has to do, I think, with that sub 8 has to do with festivals and so forth. So if you have a festival that uses portable lighting and you come in with a site plan, as long as those lights essentially remain in the same place, you don't have to keep getting your plan updated unless those lights move. And then there's a process, the review process, which includes a site plan, design, certified licensed structural engineer, qualified engineer, certifying the safety of the light structures, et cetera. So this is a very fast read of this. If you want to wait on this to evaluate this section, certainly that's your purview, but I apologize for not including that in this draft. But that is the section, and this is the section that the school district did make their comments on.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. You guys good with moving forward with what you just saw here? If you are, then
Do I need to accept that as part of my motion?
I don't think so. I think as long as everyone who participates assumes and makes their vote based upon it, which now we have it as part of it.
all right. Any other comments?
Just want to clarify. So the motion is to include the changes. Okay, sorry.
Yes. Okay, call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, so then we have initial consultation on PUD zoning, Division Street LLC 811 and 815 South Division Street. Tim?
Thanks, Chair Zellner. The applicant is seeking feedback on a request to rezone lands at 811 and 815 South Division Street from the I2 zoning district to a planned unit development prior to submitting a formal application. You may recall, this is the site in which a CUP was approved for a second structure on, I believe it was 811, the northerly site. And at that time, the commission asked to see longer term plans for the overall development of that site. The information, including the site plan, is included on pages 197 through 199 of the packet. So the request really is would you be open to these lands being considered through a planned unit development zoning or rezoning? And in addition, as part of that, the reducing the side yard setback. So per our ordinance, for an industrial planned unit development, a minimum of 5 acres is required. The aggregate acreage on this site would be 3.5. So the site plan, as shown in your packet, includes setbacks of 11 feet on the side yard. The standard side yard setback in the I2 zoning district is 20 feet. So this is really for your discussion, the extent to which you would be open to entertaining that. Again, at the, I believe it was the last plan commission at which the previous CUP was approved, there was a direction asking the applicant for a larger overall development plan. And so that's really what this represents.
Questions, comments? Commissioners? Kevin?
I thought last time we talked about this, Brian, I thought last time we talked about this, we were concerned about how many units were on the property, that it didn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it didn't sort of align with what was allowed.
So that is correct. What the conditional use permit was granted to allow a second principal structure on the property. Generally, you only allow one principal structure, but the thought process was, okay, the way they had this set up, two made sense. I believe it was at that meeting that the applicant indicated that they may have some additional plans for the property that could potentially include more than two principal structures. And at that point, it was, well, we're approving this. And I think as part of that process, you gave the applicant some time to complete some paving with the thought process of if the applicant was just going to stick with the two principal use structures that were approved as part of the conditional use permit, then there was some timing as to when some paving needed to occur on the property. But you provided a buffer in time for that paving with the idea that maybe something would come back, right? And I think this is, at least in concept, part of the discussion as to, you know, coming back of, you know, maybe if I want to do something different, could I approach this from a PUD zoning standpoint as opposed to trying to comply with existing code provisions?
One more question. So if this was 5 acres, would this be allowable?
So, I mean, I think that we're going to have further discussion on that. As I read the code, I think you would need to change the ordinance to allow for something less than 5 acres. In other words, yes, there's a lot of flexibility that is provided with PUDs, and that's in part why we have this language. But this language says shall, and so I'm not sure if the 5 acres is something that you would be able to approve as part of a PUD without amending the code. That being said, I think a commercial PUD is 2 acres. I'm not sure if the individual would be interested in that. So it's less acreage. My understanding is there's other issues with the site. I mean, if I'm reading this plan correctly, I do believe that's an easement running right through the property, and you're not going to be allowed to put structures on top of an easement. And as Tim has already noted, I think that's part of the land is in an environmental corridor that's probably going to create some issues regarding development also. So I think this is a good faith effort by the applicant to try to address some of the questions that you had when the CUP was approved, but it may be that there's more work that needs to be done.
I mean, I think staff meeting with them would be what we should do right now to iron things out. It's hard for us to say we're going to put this or we're going to go agree to this or that. We don't have all the facts here.
I don't want to speak for anyone, but I think I think one question that maybe could be helpful to answer for the applicant is if issues were able to be worked through with the staff on the code and things like easements and environmental corridor, because I do believe there was part of the conversation was the party that has that easement may be looking to move it. I don't think it's us. I think it's MMSD. Would you be conceptually okay with a PUD development if we can work that out that would allow for the multiple structures? I think that's, one of the things that I had talked about the last time is one way entities get around the multiple principal structure issue on a property is you effectively build one structure and then you either send up a condo development or you have a landlord tenant issue. But I think where you may want to provide some feedback, if you're comfortable at all with it, is to say, yeah, if you work through these issues with staff, we would be okay with some form of a PUD that would allow more than 2 principal structures.
Yeah, Chris, my only comment is, I like that, we've got somebody trying to be creative. I think that's an underutilized area. It'd be great if we could get something in there. but the utility easement's kind of a big hurdle and some of these other issues, but I mean, I'd like to pursue it just because it's kind of nice to have a creative idea how to get some, you know, get a business in there that, right now, it's just underutilized in my opinion.
Yeah, I would concur. I think that this is a good first step, but I would recommend that get with staff and try to dial in what our options are to make this work, you know, in some capacity, because I think this is you know, for that area, that property or those properties, I think this would be a great enhancement, and I think we need to find a way to make it work in some capacity.
Chris?
I agree with both those statements.
Joe?
Yeah, I agree. I think this would be a nice improvement, but there are a lot of hurdles to overcome here.
So my only comment is I agree with all of you. But I think we need to address that 5 acres thing, because if we do it for one, it starts to become more difficult to do it for others. Is that correct?
Well, I think it would go more so. I mean, I can understand where there may be a little bit of confusion in when you look at the next subsection. So we'll talk about that, but I think it would be not necessarily an exception. It would be probably if this was something that the board wanted to contemplate and the plan commission, it would more than likely require a change to the actual code as opposed to any type of an exception.
So the applicant just make sure, is the applicant here? Okay, just make sure that you know that going to the board, that that's something that's gonna have to get done. It sounds like, so. Okay,
Brian, could you speak at all to what sort of risk we end up with if we were to change that ordinance?
Well, I mean, the section of the code is 133-893, and it talks about, we basically have 4 different plan unit districts that we would establish: residential, commercial, industrial, or mixed use. For each one of those districts, for residential, industrial, and mixed use, the minimum area needs to be 5 acres. And then for commercial, it's 2 acres. Now, at some point in time, there was a policy decision that set those acreages. I don't necessarily think there's risk if, for example, you were to take the industrial district and make it the same acreage as the commercial district. It is more just you're making a policy decision that we are going to allow a little bit more flexibility with industrial PUDs. You know, I mean, you still have the ability to either approve or deny the establishment of a PUD, depending on the circumstances. You know, you always then have to treat everybody the same. And so to the extent that you, and I know I'm getting way far down the road here, but to the extent that the village board were to change this, to change the minimum acres for any of these, including industrial, you just need to know then if you move forward with an industrial PUD at a new acreage and somebody else comes down the line a year later, you're gonna have to treat them in the same way.
Sure.
Thanks. So if I'm following you, this is currently industrial, this,
Yeah.
the land use here?
Right, it's currently zoned I2.
Okay, and it's not allowable to change that to commercial? And the real reason I ask is because there's other areas around there that are commercial, so you know, is that an avenue potentially?
I think it probably depends on the uses that the property owner wants to put it to.
For the
And
facility?
I don't think that we've had those discussions. at this
Sure,
point.
okay. Thank you.
okay, is that enough guidance? Good? Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on. Number 9, staff update on a possible ordinance change to allow chickens in the village.
All
Brian,
right.
no. Miles. Tim, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Zellner. This was about beginners. Information is found on pages 200 through 206 of the packet. This was a topic that staff was directed to bring back more information, research about surrounding communities, neighborhoods within the village that have protective covenants related to this particular use. So we've done that. That information is included. You may have one current change that happened to an adjacent community. City of Madison recently updated their code to allow up to 8 chickens. Not necessarily advocating for that, but just this is an area in which other communities are looking at regulating. and are in the current process of regulating. As part of my research, I had the opportunity to meet with members of the school district who expressed a lot of interest in this allowance on two fronts. One, allowing chickens in institutional zones so that the school district could have chickens as part of ag projects. In addition, as part of those ag projects, or what are termed SAEs, or supervised agricultural experiences, what the teachers were saying was that if students would want to undertake a project that would involve keeping of chickens, they'd actually have to travel outside the village to whether it's a friend's house or a relative or something to undertake that project. Amending the code to allow this both in institutional zones as well as certain residential zones would allow those students to undertake those SAEs or supervised ag experiences in the village. And so they saw a lot of upside in terms of opportunity for those students, and would express support for this. So it depends on obviously where you want us to go as staff to start either drafting or go nowhere with something to bring something back to this body for consideration. But also included was a first draft of an ordinance, I believe, Tracy, help me if it was 2015 that the village had approached this subject and not taken any action, but that example ordinance is included in the packet. So really looking for direction where you'd like to go with this in terms of allocating staff time to bring forth an ordinance that would allow keeping of chickens in zoning districts other than just the A1.
Okay. Anybody have any comments they'd like to share? Or do you want me to go first? Since I usually make you guys go first.
And I think you brought it up.
Yeah.
So I think there is some positives in the community to have chickens. Interesting thing here, and since we have the developers and they're gonna both cower right now when I say this, since they're both into farming, we know this. And Arboretum Village, which is one of your subdivisions, has no fowl, including chickens. Golden Ponds, no fowl, including chickens. Kilkenny, silent. Southbridge, silent. Westbridge, silent. Did the later ones maybe just say, maybe we want to have that as availability potentially? Or was there a reason you didn't have it in for some and in for others? Mike, do you want to answer it for him?
I think going on society probably caused additional drafting, take place in the later versions.
Okay. So that's interesting. And as far as the communities around us, looks like most of them have at least an opportunity for people to have chickens if they want. As long as there's a license, they have minimums or maximums, I should say. Interesting that Dane, you couldn't find an ordinance. So does that mean it's just silent? I'm assuming. Yeah, that's what I meant. So, as I said before, I've had probably close to 20 people ask me about chickens. And it's been topics around the community about, we'd like to have chickens. Eggs are more expensive. I think they're coming down now again, but there's more chickens available. So this group is, where it starts here. And if we want to give direction to go down this road, this is where it starts. So if we don't, then we don't. Kevin?
I think the institutional thing is interesting. I don't think that was the intent when this was brought up originally, but I like that. That's an easy one to me. My question is, if we do something, what does it do to the covenants?
So the covenants, the covenants would supersede however those are privately enforced. I have a hunch, and maybe the developer can speak to this, but it may be the case that since the village ordinance didn't allow them, the covenants rode in tandem with that prohibition. I don't know if they would be open to amending those covenants or not. If the village were to amend its code to allow keeping of chickens, if those would be amended, I have no idea.
Go ahead, Don, you put your hand up, but I'm gonna have you go up to the microphone.
I just want to say, Don Tierney, that was the first job I ever had. My mother, they were Tierney brothers. My uncle was a bachelor and we had a large family. And that's back when we were very frugal. We didn't have indoor plumbing until I was in 8th grade. My brother Jimmy and I used to have to move the outhouse. So we had a very humble beginning. But my mother had a large egg route, and it was really what was a huge financial gain for the family. The other thing that I thought of with chickens, you remember Dick Pilsner? We did the office park together. Dick Pilsner told me that he said the only way that a child or a young person can develop feelings is by working with something alive. Think about it, whether it's a plant or an animal. Other than that, they're just, they can do their little game things today, but there's no really way of developing feelings unless you're nurturing something. So we did have in Savannah Brooks, we opened that up. We talked Mike into it over there. And I had a lot built. It was a parade house. And there was an empty lot next to it. It's the beautiful Arboretum. We sold it. And wouldn't you know that the family on the left side brought in a beautiful little chicken coop. Well, then the other family said, Mr. Tierney, buy your lot back. And I bought it back. So it's a pretty interesting situation. But has anybody ever thought about having a citywide or a village-wide referendum? And that really, that would be a way that, and you could have some people that are chicken fans do some lobbying. But I think it goes back to Dick Pilsner. And I think when you look at all the weird stuff in society today, maybe we ought to have a few chickens, but Mike and Jerry and the rest and my team, I haven't won yet. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So again, this was by roughly 20 residents that asked for this, and I wanted to give it a chance in front of us. So I'm not sensing feelings one way or another. So if they're strong against, I'd like to hear those. Gary, you're from Columbus.
I've given this discussion before. We raised, like the Tierneys, probably 400 chickens a year. Probably nobody besides Don's ever done that in this room. And so I also am from Columbus, and I was there last year, and in Columbus they can have chickens. And my mother lives next to someone who had chickens, and they got a rooster in there somehow. And I was there, and this rooster went off in the middle of the day, and then the dogs next door started going, and the other dogs started going. I said, what's going on around here? The whole neighborhood was in this uproar. And my sister said, well, the police, they won't do anything. They're afraid. They're not going to deal with this issue about somebody's chickens. So, to Don's point, you had to buy a lot back from somebody who already bought one from them because they didn't want chickens next to them. People make a big investment in this community in their home. And one of the issues you'd have in a lot of neighborhoods is, if a person has chickens, they have to put them somewhere. Well, in a lot of neighborhoods around here, you can't build a chicken coop because that would be an outdoor building and you couldn't have the chicken coop to put the chickens in. The chicken manure, it stinks. I'm just telling you, it smells bad. And where would these people put it? Right in their garbage can, which I'm sure the garbage company would really love to see every day. So if this would ever pass, I think the police should be put off the hook. If we'd ever approve chickens, I think the village board would be the ones that would have to monitor chicken complaints. And I guess the other point is, pork chops got kind of expensive now, but that doesn't mean I want to go raise a bunch of hogs. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hertzberg. Spoken by somebody who's leaving the village board, that's going to say the village board members will take care of this. That's kind of funny. Okay, thank you for sharing. Brian, your thoughts?
First, I think that the draft here is well written. I do see some concerns from I'll just say from an equity, since that seems to be a good term that goes around a lot. With the covenants in a lot of these developments, most people aren't going to be able to have them anyways, unless something happens with the covenants. So we're restricting who can have them and who can't. There was a 10-foot setback in the backyard. I know that pretty much precludes almost probably 75% of the residential development in the neighborhood, in the village. But at the end of the day, I think, I would vote against this just because I don't feel that I'll call it livestock, maybe it's a loose interpretation, but I don't think livestock belongs in the village limits. Forefathers, whether it's in 1776, 1876, or 1976, at some point said we don't want this type of predatory food source, I'll call it, in the village limits. There's fox and there is coyotes in the neighborhoods already. Probably not a significant amount, but if we start to bring or introduce chickens into that, I think that would go up significantly. And so in that case, I would be against this.
Joe.
There was obviously a nice chuckle when Don mentioned a referendum. In all honesty, that's exactly the thought I was having. I would have a really hard time voting for this without something more, 20 people coming to you is certainly substantial. But I think we need a bigger picture of what sort of support is within the village for it.
Thanks, Joe. Chris?
Personally, I'm not opposed to this. I do like that the covenants would keep precedent. But yeah, as Brian said, this is written really well and I'm not opposed to it.
Kevin?
Yeah, I wouldn't vote for it. I don't like it. I don't think we need it. If it's 50 people and then 100 people and then 1,000 people in a couple of years, we could talk about it, but I don't think now's the time.
All right, so I hear 4 definite no's at this point. So Todd's got his hand up, but I'm not ready to give you the floor yet. So give me 1 second. I've had 20 people come to me wanting chickens. This is on the agenda. There's none of the 20 that are here tonight to defend. And Todd,
that's what I was going to mention is that there's 3 individuals online as attendees with their hands up. I do understand this is not a public hearing. And
okay, so these might be some of those 20 that are on there. They have their hands up to talk right now.
They do, correct. And I guess the question would be, as an option for the commission, you've scheduled public hearings on non-statutory required hearing items before.
So future meeting, we could put it as a hearing. Is that what you're telling me? Everybody good with that? Then people have an opportunity to plead their case.
I think the village president should do a listening session before he leaves.
I agree. I think
I think this meeting has run too long at this point.
I think I do
based
just want
on
to
a
be
couple
clear for
comments so
those,
far.
Chris, for those who are online with their hands up, to be clear that this is not noticed as a public hearing. For a few in the community to have an opportunity to speak on an item that wasn't publicly posted for discussion, would be a challenge. I think we could do a better job if you care to under a properly posted hearing.
I would love to put that on to the next person in charge of this meeting. So yes, is everybody good with that? That we give people an opportunity to speak. I think that's always important, and they haven't had their opportunity, even though they'd like to tonight. So everybody good? We won't bring the chicken manure.
I'm assuming that would be a public hearing with not necessarily an action item.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I will say, thank you to all of you for going in your time, efforts, and everything for being on the Plan Commission, and motion to adjourn.
Second.
Do we have an update still?
Just one quick comment about tomorrow's joint plan commission. The only agenda item is the GDP, SIP and preliminary plat for Kilkenny Farms West.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Call the question. All in favor-
Before we go though, I would just like to say to Chris and Gary, thank you for all your services for the years, and it's probably the last time I'll be in a board meeting or a meeting with you guys, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you. So, all right, let's get out of here. The Brewer game starts in 20 minutes, in my opinion. So call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thanks, everybody. Good night.